The Grand Admiral of the Velnar Empire stood before the holographic display. His four eyes narrowed as he studied the small blue planet on the edge of what the locals called the Milky Way. "This is our next target," Admiral Krell asked, mandibles clicking in amusement. "It looks unimpressive." Captain Lorne nodded, his scaled skin reflecting the blue light of the display. "The humans call it Earth. They're a relatively young species, only achieved spaceflight within the last century. Their technology is primitive compared to ours." "Military capabilities?" Krell demanded. "Fragmented. They have no unified planetary defense system. Multiple nation-states with varying levels of military power. They still primarily use chemical propellants for weapons and space travel." Krell circled the display, his massive form casting shadows across the command deck. The Velnar Empire had conquered 17 star systems in the last decade alone. Their biomechanical ships, capable of manipulating gravity itself, had never met any meaningful resistance. "Resources? Abundant," Lorne replied. "Water, minerals, biological diversity. The planet's biosphere is remarkably rich, and the humans themselves would make excellent labor units for the mining colonies in the Zentari system." Admiral Krell made a sound that passed for laughter among his species. "Prepare the invasion fleet. Standard protocol. We'll establish orbital superiority, eliminate their primary military installations, and begin ground operations within their solar cycle." Captain Lorne hesitated. "There is one anomaly in our intelligence reports, Admiral." "Speak." "Our long-range observation indicates that humans display unusual adaptive capabilities and resourcefulness. The cultural and technological analysis team suggests caution." Krell dismissed this with a wave of his upper limb. The same was said about the Diraxians, and they surrendered after a single orbital bombardment. "Prepare the fleet." 3 weeks later, as measured by Earth time, the invasion began. The Velnar warships emerged from fold space above Earth's atmosphere, their massive hulls blocking out the sun over major cities across the planet. In Washington, D.C., General Jack Miller stared at satellite imagery, showing the alien vessels positioning themselves strategically around the globe. Emergency meetings were being held in every major government worldwide. Panic was spreading. "They're positioning for a first strike," Miller told the hastily assembled Joint Chiefs. "Standard military doctrine. Take out communications, power, and defensive capabilities first." "How do you know their doctrine?" demanded the Secretary of Defense. Miller's eyes never left the display. "I don't. But it's what I would do." The first energy beams struck military bases across the globe simultaneously. Nuclear missile silos, Air Force bases, naval ports, all targeted with surgical precision. The Velnar had clearly studied Earth's defenses thoroughly. What they hadn't anticipated was humanity's response. As communication networks were destroyed, pre-established backup systems came online. Buried fiber optic networks, designed to survive nuclear war, maintained command and control capabilities. Military units scattered, following long-established contingency plans. In orbit, Admiral Krell received the first reports with satisfaction. Phase 1 complete. Minimal resistance encountered. Begin landing operations in designated zones. Captain Lorne studied the data flowing across his console. "Admiral, I'm detecting unusual patterns. Their military forces are dispersing rather than centralizing, and civilian communications don't indicate the expected level of panic." "Irrelevant," Krell replied. "Deploy the ground forces." As the first Velnar dropships descended toward Earth, Miller and his counterparts around the world were already implementing a strategy humans had imagined in fiction for decades: asymmetric warfare against a technologically superior invader. The Velnar thought Earth would be easy. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The first Velnar ground forces landed outside major cities on every continent. Their biomechanical armor made them formidable, each soldier standing nearly 8 feet tall with integrated weapons systems and enhanced strength. They expected swift capitulation from local authorities. Instead, they found empty streets, In Denver, Commander Vex of the Velnar 3rd Expeditionary Force moved his troops through abandoned neighborhoods. "Where are the humans?" he demanded of his intelligence officer. "Scattered, Commander. Our scans show they've evacuated in seemingly random patterns. No central gathering points." Vex frowned. This wasn't standard behavior for a conquered species. The battle plan called for securing population centers, establishing processing facilities, and beginning the sorting of humans for labor assignment. 20 miles away, in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains, Emily Ross watched the alien patrol through high-powered binoculars. A former park ranger, she now led a hastily organized resistance cell. "They're moving east along the highway," she told the small group around her. Among them were veterans, hunters, engineers, and ordinary citizens who refused to surrender. "Communications are still working?" asked Tom, a retired Air Force mechanic. Emily nodded. "The mesh network is holding. They knocked out the internet backbone and cell towers, but the local equipment we salvaged is working. We're getting reports from at least 30 other groups in Colorado alone." Similar scenes were playing out across the globe. The Velnar had expected to find hierarchical resistance centered around military bases. Instead, they encountered a distributed network of small groups using terrain familiarity and improvised tactics. 2 days after the landings, the first major strike against the invaders occurred not from military forces, but from civilian infrastructure. In the Chinese province of Sichuan, engineers deliberately collapsed a major hydroelectric dam as Velnar forces moved into the valley below. The resulting flood destroyed an entire battalion of alien troops. Admiral Krell received the news with disbelief. "How did they know our forces would be in that location?" "It appears they're using primitive but effective observation networks," Captain Lorne explained. "Humans positioned in elevated terrain, using optical devices. They're also employing something called parallel processing in their resistance." Meaning? They don't wait for central commands. Each group adapts independently based on local conditions. Krell's mandibles clicked in irritation. "Increase orbital surveillance. Deploy the hunter drones." The Velnar hunter drones, autonomous flying weapons, soon filled Earth's skies. But humans had been preparing for this moment since the first ships appeared. Radio emissions ceased. Heat signatures were masked. Movement happened under cover of natural features. In what had been suburban Seattle, a Velnar patrol found itself suddenly under attack. Not from weapons, but from the environment itself. Streets collapsed into previously excavated tunnels. Water mains burst, shorting out sensitive equipment in their biomechanical armor. When the disoriented aliens emerged from the water, they faced precisely aimed rifle fire from hidden positions. None survived. In orbit, Admiral Krell's frustration grew. These are primitives. How are they coordinating these attacks? The answer was simple. They weren't, not in the way the Velnar understood coordination. Humans were acting with local initiative, sharing information horizontally rather than waiting for commands from above. Emily's group in Colorado intercepted Velnar communications, learned their patrol patterns, and set ambushes using hunting rifles and improvised explosives. When Velnar commanders adapted, humans adapted faster, changing tactics before the aliens could establish countermeasures. 1 week after the invasion began, the Velnar held only small pockets of territory, surrounded by a hostile population that seemed to vanish when confronted directly, only to strike from unexpected directions. In his bunker beneath the Appalachian Mountains, General Miller received reports from resistance groups nationwide. "They expected us to fight like they do," he told his staff. "They don't understand that we've been imagining this scenario for centuries. Every alien invasion movie, every science fiction novel. We've been rehearsing for this in our collective imagination. And now, humanity was implementing those long-imagined strategies with devastating effectiveness." Admiral Krell paced the command deck of his flagship, rage evident in every movement. 3 weeks into what should have been a simple conquest, the Velnar Empire faced an unprecedented situation. "Stalemate. Our casualties are mounting," Admiral, Captain Lorne reported. The humans are targeting our supply lines and communication relays. They're learning our technology at an alarming rate. This was perhaps the most disturbing development. Humans were recovering Velmar equipment, studying it, and in some cases, weaponizing it against its creators. In Australia, a group of mining engineers had already reverse-engineered aspects of Velmar propulsion systems, creating crude but effective countermeasures against their dropships. Enough. Krell slammed his upper limbs against the holographic display. We will escalate. Prepare the bioweapon deployment. Even Captain Lorne seemed disturbed. Admiral, the Galactic Compact expressly forbids. The Compact applies to civilized species, not primitives. Krell interrupted. Deploy the weapons. The bioweapons were released into Earth's atmosphere, engineered pathogens designed to target human DNA. Under normal circumstances, this would have ended any resistance within days. But Earth had an unexpected ally, its own biological diversity. Humans, living among countless other species and exposed to thousands of natural pathogens throughout their evolution, had immune systems unlike anything the Velnar had encountered. Many fell ill, but the devastation Krell expected didn't materialize. Moreover, human medical researchers, already mobilized due to the invasion, recognized the attack immediately. Dr. Marcus Bell, working in a hidden laboratory beneath Chicago's former subway system, identified the pathogen's mechanism within hours. It's targeting specific protein structures, he explained to his team, a collection of doctors and biologists who had evacuated from research hospitals. But it's not accounting for human genetic diversity. Some populations have natural resistance. Working around the clock, they develop treatments using Earth's own biological resources, fungi, plant compounds, and repurposed existing medications. Information spread through the resistance network, and makeshift production began in hidden facilities worldwide. In orbit, Admiral Krell received the devastating news. The bioweapon has failed. How is this possible? Captain Lorne's response was measured. Their medical science is more advanced than we anticipated, and their biology is remarkably resilient. Then we will resort to conventional means, Krell decided. Begin systematic clearing operations, level their cities if necessary. The Velnar attempted to implement this new strategy, using orbital weapons to destroy major urban centers. They expected this show of force to break human morale. Instead, it hardened their resolve. In the ruins of Barcelona, Maria Delgado led a group that specialized in electronic warfare. Using salvaged components and modified amateur radio equipment, they had been tracking Velnar communication signals. Now they took a bold step: intrusion. We've identified the encoding algorithm, Maria told her team as they huddled in a basement. It's complex, but not unbreakable. For 3 days, they worked on the problem, writing software that could inject false data into Velnar tactical networks. When they succeeded, the results were immediate and dramatic. Velnar forces began firing on their own units, confused by contradictory orders and false enemy sightings. Similar breakthroughs occurred worldwide. In Japan, a team of robotics engineers hijacked a Velnar maintenance drone, giving them unprecedented insight into the aliens' technology. In Brazil, resistance fighters discovered that certain local plant compounds disrupted the neural interfaces of Velnar biomechanical systems. Krell's frustration turned to concern as reports flooded in. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were innovating at a pace the Velnar had never witnessed in any species. Admiral, Captain Lorne said quietly, I believe we may need to consider tactical withdrawal and reassessment. Retreat. Before these primitives. Krell's voice carried both rage and disbelief. The Empire has never retreated. The Empire has never faced a species like this, Lorne replied. They don't fight as individuals or even as nations. They fight as a planetary collective, each group contributing specialized knowledge and adapting independently. As if to punctuate this point, alarms blared across the command ship. Admiral, we're detecting multiple launches from the planet's surface. The view screen showed dozens of objects rising from Earth's atmosphere, makeshift missiles cobbled together from Velnar technology and human innovation, aimed directly at the invasion fleet. The human-made missiles weren't particularly sophisticated, but they didn't need to be. Built using salvaged Velnar propulsion systems and guided by reprogrammed navigational computers, they targeted the invasion fleet's most vulnerable points. The Velnar, accustomed to facing enemies who used predictable attack patterns, found themselves unprepared for the seemingly random trajectories. Several smaller Velnar vessels sustained critical damage. The larger command ships activated defensive measures, but even these were compromised, the result of human hackers who had been working tirelessly to penetrate Velnar systems. Admiral Krell watched in disbelief as sections of his fleet went dark. This is impossible. Their technological level shouldn't allow for this. Captain Lorne's response was measured. It appears they're not developing new technology, Admiral. They're adapting ours, and they're doing it remarkably quickly. This was humanity's true advantage. Not their military might, but their adaptability. In underground facilities around the world, scientists and engineers worked around the clock, studying captured Velnar technology and finding ways to repurpose it. In a converted mine shaft in South Africa, Dr. James Wilson led a team analyzing the aliens' energy weapons. Their power source uses principles similar to our theoretical work on quantum field manipulation. He explained to the assembled engineers, "We can't replicate it entirely, but we can use similar principles to disrupt it." The result was the development of quantum jammers, devices that created localized interference fields, rendering Velnar weapons temporarily useless. Within days, resistance groups worldwide were deploying these jammers, further tipping the balance. Admiral Krell, faced with mounting losses, made a decision that would prove disastrous. "We will deploy ground forces in maximum strength. Overwhelm them with numbers." Captain Lorne objected. "Admiral, our intelligence suggests this is exactly what they're expecting. They've prepared ambush zones and choke points. They are primitives." Krell raged. "They cannot stand against our full military might." The massive deployment began. Thousands of Velnar troops descended to Earth's surface, expecting to crush resistance through sheer force. Instead, they found humans had turned familiar terrain into deadly traps. In the rice paddies of Vietnam, Velnar troops discovered too late that the seemingly solid ground had been subtly modified. When stepped on with their heavy biomechanical armor, sections collapsed into hidden pits lined with salvaged Velnar energy conduits, electrocuting entire squads. In the English countryside, ancient tunnel networks dating back to medieval times had been expanded and repurposed. Velnar forces, detecting human heat signatures, would enter these tunnels only to have sections collapse, trapping them underground. The urban environments proved even more treacherous. Humans used their intimate knowledge of infrastructure, sewage systems, subway tunnels, building maintenance passages, to move invisibly, striking and disappearing before the Velnar could respond. General Miller, coordinating with resistance leaders globally, implemented what they call the homeworld advantage strategy. "We fight only where we know the terrain better than they do," he explained in encrypted broadcasts. "We choose the battlefields. We set the terms of engagement." The strategy worked. Velnar casualties mounted, while their victories became increasingly pyrrhic. They might capture a city, only to find it booby-trapped and devoid of useful resources or strategic value. In orbit, Admiral Krell received increasingly desperate reports from his ground commanders. His fleet, once imposing, had been reduced by nearly 30%. Through a combination of human attacks, sabotage, and the need to withdraw damaged vessels. This was supposed to be a simple conquest, he snarled at his command staff. How could we have miscalculated so severely? The answer came from an unexpected source, the Velnar's own Cultural Analysis Division, which had been studying human behavior patterns. "Admiral," the lead analyst explained, "humans appear to have a unique psychological characteristic. When faced with overwhelming technological superiority, Rather than surrendering, they become more innovative. Their entire cultural history contains stories of overcoming superior forces through adaptation and unconventional tactics. Captain Lorne nodded gravely. They were prepared for us, Admiral. Not militarily, but psychologically. They've been imagining this scenario for generations. As if to emphasize this point, a new attack began, not against Velnar military targets, but against their environmental systems. Humans had discovered that Velnar troops required specific atmospheric compositions in their base installations. Now, using modified agricultural chemicals, resistance groups were creating localized atmospheric disruptions that forced the aliens to retreat to their ships or risk respiratory failure. The invasion had reached a critical turning point. The Velnar still held superior technology, but humans had the ultimate home field advantage, and they were using it with devastating effectiveness. 4 months into the invasion, the balance had shifted dramatically. What began as a straightforward conquest had devolved into a war of attrition that the Velnar were losing. Admiral Krell faced a decision that no Velnar commander had made in generations: strategic retreat. "We cannot sustain these losses," Captain Lorne argued during a tense command meeting. "The humans have adapted to every tactic we've employed. They're now using modified versions of our own technology against us." This was perhaps the most alarming development. Human scientists had studied captured Velnar equipment and were now producing hybrid weapons that combined Earth materials with alien principles. These weren't as sophisticated as pure Velnar technology, but they were effective. And humans were manufacturing them at an astonishing rate. In a repurposed automotive factory in Detroit, production lines that once made cars now assembled disruption fields that could disable Velnar armor. In Silicon Valley, programmers had created viruses specifically designed to infiltrate and corrupt Velnar navigation systems. Admiral Krell paced the command deck, his pride warring with military reality. "If we withdraw, it will be the first defeat in the modern history of the Empire. If we stay," Lorne countered, "it may be the Empire's last defeat." The decisive moment came when humans demonstrated their most shocking adaptation yet. A small team led by Dr. Wilson had been studying the principle behind Velnar faster than light travel. They couldn't replicate the technology fully, but they discovered something equally valuable: a way to detect when and where Velnar ships would emerge from fold space. This intelligence gave resistance forces precious minutes to prepare whenever Velnar reinforcements arrived. New ships emerging from fold space found themselves immediately under attack, often before their defensive systems were fully operational. Admiral Krell received the report of 3 consecutive supply ships destroyed this way with growing horror. "They've compromised our most fundamental tactical advantage." "Admiral," Captain Lorne said gravely, "we must consider that this planet may be unique in our experience. The humans don't just adapt to survive. They adapt to win." After much internal conflict, Krell made the call. "Begin evacuation procedures. We will withdraw to the outer reaches of their solar system and reassess." The Velnar retreat began, but humans weren't content to simply watch them leave. Using the communications technology they'd reverse-engineered, resistance groups worldwide coordinated a massive counterattack. As Velnar troops attempted to reach their evacuation points, they found routes blocked, landing zones compromised, and their communications jammed. What should have been an orderly withdrawal became increasingly chaotic. General Miller, watching satellite feeds from his command center, allowed himself a small smile. "Push them hard," he ordered. "Don't give them time to regroup or take anything with them." This was critical to humanity's strategy. Every piece of Velnar technology left behind was another opportunity to learn, adapt, and prepare for what might come next. In orbit, Admiral Krell watched with mounting fury as his once proud invasion force scrambled to escape. "We will return," he vowed to Captain Lorne. "With a force 10 times this size, we will burn their civilization to ashes." Lorne's response was measured. "Admiral, with respect, I believe the Empire should carefully consider that option. This species has demonstrated capabilities unlike any we've encountered. Given time to study our technology further. He didn't need to finish the thought. Both officers understood the implications. The humans weren't just defending their world. They were rapidly ascending the technological ladder using Velnar knowledge as a shortcut. As the last Velnar ships broke orbit, celebrations erupted across Earth. But in military and scientific installations, the mood was more determined than jubilant. Humanity had won the first round, but they harbored no illusions that the conflict was over. They'll be back, General Miller told an emergency session of the United Nations. And next time, they'll come prepared for our tactics. Dr. Wilson nodded in agreement, which means we need to be prepared with entirely new ones, and we need to understand their technology well enough to defend against whatever they bring next. Around the world, recovery and research began simultaneously. Velnar wreckage was cataloged and transported to secure facilities. Captured aliens, mostly wounded soldiers unable to evacuate, became reluctant sources of information. Humanity had discovered something about itself during the invasion. The nations of Earth, so often divided by politics and borders, had found common cause. The resistance networks established during the fighting evolved into collaborative research initiatives. Knowledge flowed freely across former boundaries. As Admiral Krell's fleet retreated to the outer solar system to lick its wounds and await reinforcements, humans were already preparing for the next phase of a war they now understood was just beginning. The Velnar retreated to the outskirts of the solar system, establishing a temporary base on a frozen dwarf planet beyond Neptune. Admiral Krell, his reputation in tatters, had been recalled to the Empire. In his place, Grand Strategist Mox arrived to assess the situation and plan the next invasion. "This report cannot be accurate," Mox said, his six-fingered hand tapping the data display as he confronted Captain Lorne. "Primitives cannot reverse-engineer quantum field technology in mere months. The humans are not what we understood them to be," Lorne replied carefully. "Their scientific progress doesn't follow predictable patterns like other species we've encountered. They make intuitive leaps. On Earth, those leaps were accelerating. The remains of Velnar ships and equipment had been distributed to research centers worldwide. Unlike before the invasion, when nations jealously guarded technological advances, information now flowed freely through a new global network. In Geneva, a newly formed United Earth Defense Council coordinated these efforts. Representatives from every nation gathered to share discoveries and plan strategy. Among them, General Miller had emerged as the head of military operations, while Dr. Wilson led the scientific division. The Velnar power systems operate on principles we theorized but couldn't implement, Dr. Wilson explained during a briefing. Their mistake was giving us working examples. We don't need to invent the technology from scratch. We just need to understand and reproduce it. Progress came rapidly. 6 months after the Velnar retreat, the first human-made ships utilizing alien propulsion systems were under construction. They weren't as sophisticated as Velnar vessels, but they were functional, and crucially, they could operate beyond Earth's atmosphere. General Miller supervised the training of the first space defense forces. "We can't wait for them to come back to us," he told the recruits, men and women selected from military services worldwide. "We need to take the fight to them before they can launch another invasion." This proactive stance reflected humanity's new understanding of their position. The Earth was no longer isolated. It was part of a galactic community, albeit an unwilling one. And in that community, technological superiority was the only effective defense. The first test of humanity's new capabilities came sooner than expected. A Velnar scout ship, sent to assess Earth's recovery, was detected approaching the Moon. Instead of finding a planet still licking its wounds, the scout encountered Earth's first defensive space fleet. The engagement was brief but significant. The human vessels, though crude by Velnar standards, successfully forced the scout to retreat. Analysis of the encounter revealed something important. The Velnar had underestimated humanity again, expecting them to need years to adapt alien technology. In his command base beyond Neptune, Grand Strategist Mox received the scout's report with growing concern. They've advanced decades within months, he told his war council. The reinforcements we've requested may not be sufficient. Captain Lorne, now serving as Mox's reluctant advisor, offered a perspective the Velner found difficult to accept. The humans don't think like us, strategist. They don't advance incrementally. When presented with working technology, they don't just copy it. They improve upon it, find new applications we never considered. This assessment proved prophetic. Within a year of the invasion's failure, Earth had established a defensive perimeter extending beyond the Moon. Salvaged and reverse-engineered Velnar sensors allowed early detection of any approaching threat. More importantly, humans had begun experimenting with the principles behind the Velnar's faster-than-light travel. Dr. Wilson's team made the breakthrough in an underground facility in New Zealand. The Velnar approach to fold space technology is actually unnecessarily complex, she explained to the Defense Council. They developed it incrementally over centuries. We're starting fresh, without preconceptions. The result was a human variation on fold space technology that, while shorter-ranged than the Velnar version, was more energy efficient. The first test flights reached Mars in seconds rather than the days required by conventional propulsion. As Earth's defensive capabilities grew, so did its intelligence gathering. Captured Velnar communications equipment had given humans insight into the broader galactic political landscape. They learned of the Empire's structure, its history of conquest, and most importantly, its vulnerabilities. The Velnar Empire isn't monolithic, General Miller explained during a strategy session. They've conquered numerous species, many of whom serve unwillingly. If we can demonstrate that the Empire isn't invincible, the implication was clear. Earth wouldn't just defend itself. It would take the fight to the Velnar, targeting the fragile political structure that kept their conquered worlds in line. In his base at the edge of the solar system, Grand Strategist Mox received increasingly disturbing intelligence. The humans weren't merely preparing defenses, they were building warships. More concerning, these vessels incorporated design elements that suggested humans had intuited weaknesses in Velnar technology that the Velnar themselves had never addressed. We cannot wait for Imperial reinforcements, Mox decided. We must strike now, before they develop further. Captain Lorne voiced the concern that many Velnar officers now shared. What if we fail again, strategist? What if we only provide them with more of our technology to adapt and improve upon? It was a question without a good answer. The Velnar had never faced a species that turned defeat into technological leapfrogging. They had no doctrine for such an enemy. As Mox prepared his remaining forces for a desperate preemptive strike, Earth's first long-range reconnaissance vessels were already venturing beyond the solar system, seeking allies among other species who had reason to fear or hate the Velnar Empire. The humans were taking the war to the stars. 2 years after the failed invasion, the conflict had transformed entirely. What began as a straightforward conquest attempt by a superior alien force had evolved into a complex interstellar struggle, with Earth emerging as the unexpected center of resistance against the Velnar Empire. The Empire, accustomed to easy victories and subjugated worlds, found itself facing something unprecedented. A coalition of species united against them, organized and led by humans. In the Galactic Council chamber on Velnar Prime, Emperor Zoth demanded explanations. How have these primitives turned our conquered territories against us? How have they mastered technologies that took us centuries to develop? The answer came from an unlikely source, a xenoanthropologist who had studied human history from captured records. Majesty, humans possess a unique cultural characteristic. Throughout their history, they've envisioned encounters with more advanced civilizations, in their art, literature, and entertainment. When we arrived, they weren't shocked or paralyzed as other species have been. In a sense, they had been psychologically preparing for us for generations. This psychological preparation had translated into practical advantages. Humans approached alien technology without the preconceptions that limited other species. They combined Vellner principles with Earth innovations, creating hybrid technologies that sometimes surpassed the originals. More importantly, humans excelled at diplomacy and coalition building. Earth emissaries had traveled to worlds under Vellner control, bringing evidence that the Empire could be fought successfully. Species that had lived under the Imperial boot for generations found new hope in the human example. On the contested world of Proxima Centauri's lone habitable planet, General Miller, now Admiral Miller of the United Earth Defense Force, coordinated a multi-species resistance. The Vellner expect us to think like them, he explained to his diverse command staff. Hierarchical, methodical, bound by tradition. Our advantage is that each of our species thinks differently. The Vellner soon learned the cost of facing this coalition. When their forces approached to crush the Proxima Centauri rebellion, they encountered defense systems that combined human adaptability, Doraxian stealth technology, and Zentari gravitic principles, a combination they had never prepared for. Dr. Wilson, now heading Earth's Xenotechnology Institute, had developed a revolutionary approach to technological advancement. We don't need to understand everything about how a technology works to improve it, she told her multi-species research team. We find the principles, test the boundaries, and innovate. This approach had led to breakthroughs the Vellner couldn't have anticipated. Earth ships now employed defense systems that adapted in real time to Vellner attacks, analyzing weapon signatures and modifying shields accordingly. Human-designed AI systems processed battlefield data at speeds the more rigid Vellner tactical computers couldn't match. On Vellner Prime, Emperor Za faced a growing crisis. Reports from the front lines were dire. 3 systems had fallen to the human-led coalition. Imperial citizens were beginning to question the once unassailable military leadership. We must negotiate, suggested the Grand Conclave, the Emperor's advisory body. The humans have proven they cannot be conquered conventionally. Negotiate with primitives. Zoth's rage was palpable. We are the Vellner. We have dominated the galaxy for millennia. But reality was becoming impossible to ignore. The coalition forces weren't just defending. They were advancing, liberating Vellner-controlled worlds. More concerning, many of these worlds were choosing to ally with Earth rather than return to independence, impressed by the humans' collaborative rather than conquering approach. The final turning point came at the Battle of Vellner Gate, the heavily fortified star system that protected the approach to the Empire's core worlds. The Vellner had concentrated their fleet there, expecting a prolonged siege that would drain the coalition's resources. Instead, they faced a strategy uniquely human in conception. Rather than attacking the gate directly, coalition forces targeted the surrounding supply lines and communication hubs. They employed electronic warfare to create confusion in Vellner command structures. They introduced engineered viruses into the Vellner biomechanical systems. When the actual attack came, it was from an unexpected vector, using a variation of fold space technology that the Vellner sensors couldn't detect. The coalition fleet emerged within the defensive perimeter, bypassing the most powerful weapons entirely. Admiral Miller, commanding the flagship Defender, opened communications with the Vellner command. Your forces are surrounded. Your reinforcements cannot reach you. We offer terms. The terms were not what the Vellner expected. There was no demand for surrender or subjugation, concepts central to their own imperial philosophy. Instead, humans offered peace, trade, and mutual defense. We don't want your worlds or your people, Miller explained to the stunned Vellner commanders. We want a galaxy where different species can coexist without conquest. You thought Earth would be easy because we were technologically behind you. You didn't understand that technology isn't everything. Adaptability, creativity, cooperation. These are strengths your empire never valued. On Vellner Prime, Emperor Za faced the unthinkable, accepting human terms or watching his empire crumble system by system. The decision would reshape galactic civilization. In the years that followed, the galaxy entered a new era. The Vellner Empire transformed into a commonwealth, with former conquered worlds gaining autonomy. Earth became the center of a growing interstellar alliance based on principles of mutual respect and shared knowledge. Admiral Miller, speaking at the opening of the new Galactic Council headquarters on neutral territory, reflected on the journey. When the Velnar came to Earth, they thought they were simply conquering another primitive world. They didn't realize they were triggering a transformation that would change the galaxy forever. Dr. Wilson, standing beside him, added the perspective that had guided human strategy throughout the conflict. The Velnar mistake was seeing difference as weakness. What makes each of our species unique? Our different ways of thinking, our different approaches to problems. That's actually our greatest collective strength. The Velnar delegates in attendance, once conquerors and now reluctant partners, were beginning to understand. They had approached Earth expecting an easy victory and encountered instead a species that turned invasion into opportunity, weakness into strength, and enemies into allies. They had thought Earth would be easy. Humans had proven them wrong in ways that would echo through galactic history for millennia to come.